Why in our bed? I asked finally. I was still looking at Anna. Though the force replied, James in our bed, I interjected. James noticed I wasn't asking him. He looked at Anna in our bed. I looked at my wife. She didn't have an answer. I felt my heart pound and my chest constricted. I stood up and walked out the door. Once outside, I quickly found a secluded corner, hoping for some privacy. I curled up in a ball and tried to contain my emotions. I dug my nails into my palms, trying to fight through the feelings of pain, resentment, and betrayal. I mostly held back the sobs, but some moans came out. I was still struggling with my emotions when I felt someone's hand on me and then arms wrapping around me. Just amazing, I thought to myself. Now I have a midfielder trying to comfort me. As the arms wrapped around me tightly, I thought he smells so much better than before. Then I thought he feels a lot better than before too. I didn't want to open my eyes. I clenched them tightly to hold back the tears, but I couldn't hold back the shivering. Then I felt the midfielder's cheek pressed against mine. In shock, I pulled back and opened my eyes. It wasn't the midfielder, it was my wife's angelic face staring back at me. Why in our bed? Anna still couldn't answer, and I figured I lost 4 million walking out of the conference room. So did it all matter? I know I hurt you, but please, it wasn't my idea, Anna pleaded. I just stared at her. He made me date him and give myself to him. He made me take pictures for him. I know I cheated your trust too. Please, Roy, please, I need you. If I told you before, he would have fired you. We would have drowned and lost everything we did, lose everything, I told her. You were the reason I worked so hard. I had to work hard to pay for all those things you wanted so badly. When I left, I realized I didn't care about any of those things, just you. Anna gave me a quick kiss on the lips and asked, Is there somewhere we can go? I didn't want to lead her to my apartment. I knew what would happen there. It was still early, so I said, Okay, come with me. I took her to the original Albuquerque Max in the Rough. It's nothing more than a diner, but it serves some of the most delicious dishes that are called Rough. I ordered one for each of us. After we got our food and sat down, I offered her a box and opened my own. I pulled out a roll and took a bite, showing Anna how to eat it. She must have been hungry or intrigued because she got down to business, finishing her first draft before I did. I decided to start the dinner conversation with the most important question of all. Why didn't you come to me when Johnson started pressuring you, Anna? He told me he'd fire you and ruin your reputation if I did. She pleaded. I wanted to tell you, you have no idea how much I wanted to come to you. She looked at me, pleading. I hated being with him. I hated that he would even touch me, but I needed to save our future, save it by ruining it. Really, Anna? What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking about loving you and wanting us to always be together, she replied. How can sex show your love for me? Anna, how does it help us be together? That's why I told you I didn't want to go any farther than role-playing. I liked role-playing, but I died inside when I saw his car in our driveway. I lowered my eyes. It ripped my heart out. Anna, he didn't want her to stay with me, so I drove her back to the motel. There she wouldn't let me leave. She led me over to a table in the lobby. I noticed that both her lawyer and mine were sitting at the next table. Apparently, they were staying at the motel too. James Johnson or any of his legal team was nowhere to be seen. The waitress took our drink orders, bourbon and C for me, and red wine for Anna. We sat down together and started talking, discussing our situation and our feelings. 1 drink turned into 2, and 2 turned into 3. It was getting late. I couldn't believe I had spent almost 5 hours talking to my soon-to-be ex-wife. I wanted to go home, but I realized I had too much to drink to drive safely to my apartment. Anna took my hand, brought it to her lips, and kissed my knuckles. I opened my palm and pressed it against her cheek. Then I brought her face close to mine and did something I thought I would never do again. I kissed her. Her soft lips, her taste, her scent, all at once confirmed what I had realized over the past few months. I was still in love with her. As we continued to kiss and hold each other, I looked into her eyes, eyes that were usually deep and penetrating, so full of excitement and vitality that I felt as if I could live off of them today. However, her eyes reflected deep sadness and regret. They told me that she hated everything that bastard had done to her and to us. After a while, I started to think about calling a cab, but she must have sensed that I was about to leave. She got up, took my hand, and pulled me behind her without saying a word. She walked us to the elevator, and once inside, she pressed the 4th floor button. When we got upstairs, I drew her to me and began kissing her again. She responded enthusiastically to my kisses. Once we reached the 4th floor, we exited the elevator. She led me to room 44, kissing me as she went. I pressed her back against the door and kissed her passionately while she tried to retrieve a key card from her purse. When the worrying sound of the door lock unlocking was heard, I grabbed her ass and lifted her off the floor. She pushed on the handle, and I carried her into the room, pinning her against the wall. When the door automatically closed, I started caressing her sides with one hand and her ass with the other, without breaking the kiss. She tried to look worried and scared, but she was failing. I knew she was faking it. Anger was my dominant emotion, but what was I angry about? Of course, I wanted to kick Johnson's ass from this place to Timberwolf's buck. Unfortunately, he wasn't here. It was just me and my ex-wife. Sure, I was out of breath from our sex and falling on my back, but I was at a loss for words because I was so angry with her. I couldn't get rid of the thought of seeing that Ashel Johnson naked standing behind my naked wife in our bedroom. Damn her. As I caught my breath and stared up at the ceiling, tears began to roll down my cheeks. I wanted to hate this woman I was now holding in my arms again, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. I tried to accept her lawyer's statement and Johnson's statement that it wasn't her fault, but I couldn't. It was her fault because she didn't come to me, didn't tell me the bastard was trying to blackmail her. I'd always been on her side, and she knew I'd protect her as best I could. So why didn't she trust me? Why couldn't you come to me? The thought was eating away at me like acid. I had to know. I couldn't say anything. He said he would ruin you first. He'd fire you, and then he'd start a campaign to ruin your reputation so badly that you'd never be able to get a job again, she replied quietly. And you believed him? I asked. I believed him, I said. I heard a knock on the door. I stood up and grabbed my pants, quickly putting them on. I went to open the door, having first looked through the peephole. I saw a lawyer standing in the hallway. I mentioned this to Anna and suggested she get dressed. She rushed into the bathroom, forgetting that her clothes were still scattered around the room. Just a minute, I hastily called out, putting on my shirt and already pulling on my pants and buttoning them. I opened the door and was rewarded with a smile from Anna's lawyer. Nice to see you again, she said. After I stepped back and invited her in, my lawyer followed her in. After surveying the hallway for the presence of intruders, I closed the door. In the room was a table with 2 chairs, at which I invited the 2 attorneys, Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Blake, to sit. Mrs. Patterson pointed to Anna's dress on the bed and asked, "Will she need it?" I hurriedly grabbed the dress and went into the bathroom. I opened it wide and pulled the dress through the narrow opening. "Our lawyers are here, baby," I told her. "Okay, I'll be right out." Settling down on the bed, I looked at the lawyers expectantly. "Okay, what's wrong?" I asked. Mrs. Patterson replied with a knowing smile. "I guess now you know why I couldn't take your case." I really didn't know, and my look apparently convinced to elaborate. "I am a contract worker, and I represent people who are referred to me by Mr. Johnson." Upon hearing this information, I immediately decided to throw her out of the room. But then I realized that she was the one who referred me to the lawyer who had burned Johnson for all the fees and stuff for a good $10 million. I looked at her. "Why did you refer me to Mr. Blake even though you could have just told me to get on with my life?" Her smile became small, then grew and almost covered her face. "There are few people in the world I dislike, even fewer I despise, and only one person I hate. And I've been kept safe by that hateful son of a..." She tried to soften her gaze. You heard what that piece of did to your wife and to others too. I wanted to see him in jail, but there was no way I could think of a way. However, when you came in with that folder of information, I knew I had him in my hands. She pointed at Mr. Blake. So I set him up. Mr. Blake continued. If the wrong person finds out what Miss Patterson did, she'll be disbarred, so you have to keep it a secret, Roy. I nodded in agreement. As Anna came out of the bathroom in her dress, "Hi, Sarah," she greeted her attorney. Sarah Patterson stood up and gave Anna a hug. Feeling better, Anna nodded enthusiastically. I looked at my lawyer. I'd say we did a pretty good job on him. He laughed. Better than good. He pulled out an envelope and held it out to me. Opening the envelope, I found a check for $4 million, the full amount of the settlement. Puzzled, I looked at him and asked, "Weren't you supposed to get half?" Mr. Blake smiled and said, "You didn't listen to Miss Patterson. She told you he paid all the legal fees." Sarah Patterson asked, "Do you know what you're going to do with all that money?" I shook my head, just staring at the check. Anna joked, "I can help you with that decision if you want to." I looked at my lawyer again and asked, "What about the divorce? How are things going with that?" He fed embarrassment and scratched his head. Exaggerated. Go to damn it. I totally forgot to file that damn petition. How could I have been so forgetful? Sarah laughed, and I heard a light giggle from Anna. I seemed to be the only person who didn't get the joke. It didn't seem right. Then Mr. Blake said, "Looks like you'll have to file for divorce in New Mexico now that you're settled here." I didn't think he was trying to dodge the job. Mr. Blake and Sarah Patterson asked, "When you came to my office with tears in your eyes and asked me to help you file on this woman, I realized you were still deeply in love with her. So I took it upon myself to thwart the divorce, and when I saw the picture of Mr. Johnson with whom she had cheated, I had to act. I betrayed my professional ethics and risked losing my license to practice law to see you reunited." As I listened to her, I knew she meant what she said. I studied the look on her face for a while. "Do you remember Eric Mentor?" Her eyes immediately turned red and filled with tears. She remembered him well. That divorce almost killed him. I said. She nodded and whispered quietly, "I know." After a moment, she clarified, "That was the man James told you about. He did the same thing to him as he did to you." She obviously empathized deeply with the suffering people of the world, feeling their pain and hurt. I couldn't imagine that with that attitude, she could have a long career as a lawyer. Finally, she stood up, gave Mr. Blake a big hug, and they left together. Anna looked very good in her dress, especially considering there was no underwear underneath. It was quite some time before we left the room. It was actually already lunchtime the next day. After discharge, I took Anna to my apartment and showed her around. She laughed at the fact that my bed was in the living room, smiling. Anna said it reassured her that I wasn't having fun with anyone yet. I know it sounds like a cliché, but real men forgive. Of course, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, but I decided I couldn't live without her. Many people would criticize my decision to reconcile with Anna, but those people may never have been as much in love as I was with Anna. Pragmatically speaking, I had invested 6 years of my life, love and heart into this woman, and I didn't want them to go to waste. And finally, I couldn't call myself a man if I couldn't forgive her. Epilogue. I looked at my 3-year-old son sitting in the stroller beside me as I turned the Harley toward Mac's Steak in the Rough restaurant and pulled into the parking lot. My wife parked her new Lexus in the bay next to me. My son smiled broadly as I took him out of his stroller and set him on the ground beside me. "Daddy, Daddy," my 2-year-old daughter called out to me as Anna opened the door and unbuckled her from the infant seat. She ran to jump in my arms. She's a bit of a daddy's girl, but I never complained. I carried my daughter into the restaurant, and Anna let our son inside. As my family gathered around me, I felt like life was a success. I kissed my beloved wife with love and gratitude. She had gained a few pounds after 2 pregnancies, and because she breastfed the children and sometimes me, her breasts sagged a bit, but I didn't complain. We had a great dinner, laughing and joking. In fact, Anna and I had been laughing with each other ever since we got back together. We were doing well, and it got even better as the kids came along. It was the kind of family I had always dreamed of. My career is booming, allowing me to make more money than I ever made working for that Johnson. For now, Anna is a stay-at-home mom. She plans on doing volunteer work at the hospital when our daughter Chelsea starts school. Believe it or not, James Johnson was stupid enough to try his scam again. Only this time, when the cuckoo was done with him, James couldn't walk anymore. The cuckoo got him so good that James is now confined to a wheelchair. The dude he conned is in jail, and I'm glad I left rather than confront him. When I was so angry, I don't miss my old town as much as I thought I would. I love Albuquerque and the surrounding area. We bought a house in El Lewis, which translates to Lost Moons. It's a great place to raise kids, with lots of nice people and organized activities like Little League baseball and full soccer. Having young children puts a strain on a parent's sex life. Our sex life is shrunk, but we still make love as often as we can. Anna has never suggested role-playing cheating again. We still have date nights and make love simply because we are still madly in love with each other. Having young children puts a strain on a parent's sex life. Our sex life has shrunk, but we still make love as often as we can. Anna has never suggested role-playing or cheating again. We still have date nights and make love simply because we are still madly in love with each other. Just the other day, Anna surprised me with a weekend getaway, something we hadn't done in years. It was a small cabin by the lake, secluded and quiet. As we sat by the water watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized how far we had come. The pain, the betrayal, and the anger, it all seemed so distant, like a bad dream. "Do you ever think about it?" I asked her softly, my hand intertwined with hers. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not the way I used to. Now, I think about how lucky we are to have survived it. How much stronger we are because of it." I nodded, understanding what she meant. Our relationship had been tested in ways I never imagined, but in the end, we found our way back to each other. We built something new, something more resilient. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I realized that, for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The future felt bright again, and I knew that whatever challenges came our way, we would face them together. And that was enough for me.